Hello and welcome again to another edition of Public Affairs Public Access. I'm your host, David Hutzelman, and this is a show where we discuss political philosophy and public policy, sometimes from a libertarian perspective. But tonight we've got a pretty big tent in terms of what our subject is, and it's a subject that I think most any concerned citizen as well as any libertarian can relate to, and that's an issue of government transparency and accountability. And I'm honored to have a couple guests here this evening who have been on the front lines of some of that struggle to maintain some transparency and accountability in government agencies and their decisions. Of course, we all know the reason that government grows is because most of the programs they come up with have a very small set of people who benefit from the programs, and yet a very diffuse group of people who actually have to pay for them. So it's really not in anyone's real self-interest to get too excited about some of these programs. I mean, I've spent quite a while debating with Metro, but I mean, for a 1-cent sales tax and what that means to me on an annual basis, it's hardly worth my time to go down to a Metro meeting. So we have a couple of folks here who have taken that a little more seriously, although some of the things that are happening to them, mainly through Metro, have come a little closer to home than they did to me. I didn't have Metro threatening to build a light rail line down my street, but as Thomas Jefferson said way back when, that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And so if we don't have people that are trying to keep the government accountable and transparent enough for normal people, a normal citizen, to understand what's going on, well then the government's going to grow and we're going to become marginalized in our citizenship. And so my hat is off to both of my guests tonight, who have been fighting the good fight in terms of trying to keep the citizens informed about what's going on and taking their own personal time and effort to translate that into something that the rest of us can understand. And so I'd like to introduce to you, on my left is Daphne Scarborough. Hello. Daphne is a small business owner. She owns the Brass Maiden on Richmond, which has kind of been in the path of the past programs for light rail, and which got her attention. And then across the street from me there is Jim Scarborough. He's a homeowner and a real estate agent in the Galleria area. And the Galleria bus rapid transit system, which we're going to hear something about as we go on, has come closer to home to him, and like a lot of us, waking up to the call of what's going on here, and who's, as the old Latin saying, cui bono, who's benefiting from this? Is it really the citizens and the people that are interested in more mobility, or is it more sinister group of people that have some real estate property and engineering and construction contracts that are going to be the real beneficiaries? But both Jim and Daphne have been in Austin this past week at a meeting of the House Special Districts Committee. And I'm going to ask them to take a little time to tell us what that's all about, what they learned there, and what we as an average listener and concerned citizen can take away from what was decided. So, Daphne?
Well, thank you. Yes, we had an exciting intercourse with the House Special Districts Committee on just this week, 2 days ago. And this committee meets before the legislature meets, so they can kind of get a feel for what the public is interested in and what is really going on with some of the legislation that they have enacted in the past. And so we were very proud of our Houston people, and we had a dozen people there to speak from 5 different districts to explain to the committee what really goes on the ground level with these special districts. And the special district is Harris County Improvement District. And in Houston, we have more of them than any other city in Texas. And they put a tax, levy a tax on businesses and on commercial property. Residential normally do not pay the tax in a management district. It is strictly for commercial, and it goes into a pool. And in this case, they like to call it an assessment, but assessment, tax, it's all the same thing. If you don't pay it, they put a lien on your property. And there was one of my restaurateur friends, 40-year-old restaurant, that they did take his property for and auction it on the courthouse steps for non-payment of the tax. So it is a tax, even though they try to kind of play a few semantics with that. And so as a result of that, these districts were formed by legislative act. And they form them, and then they come back to the area that's been delineated in the district, and they get 25 signatures to enact the tax on, in our case, we have the Montrose district, so we have about 1,000, 1,100 taxpayers, so 25 people could put a tax on 1,000 to 1,100 taxpayers. The majority of these people were not notified. There was a special hearing back in October of 2010, but if you didn't know someone who got the notice, then you wouldn't know that this was going on until you got this tax bill in your mail. And they like to hire law firms to handle all the technical stuff. And so you would have a law firm handling the lobbying to get the district in the first place. And then you have another law firm that handles the collection of the tax. And then you have an auditor that produces an audit as per what they give on the numbers, so it's not really a neutral audit. The district is able to supply their own numbers for the audit. And so there is a problem with transparency, and this also, by the decree from the legislature, is an unelected board. And so that means it's appointed. The mayor approves all the appointments on the board. So for a number of us in a libertarian mindset and an American mindset, this is taxation without representation. Because even within the legislation, they do require the district board meetings once a month to have a public comment period. And you're allowed 2 minutes to get up and ask questions. But they also have a provision by law that they do not answer you. So if you want an answer, then you have to go back to the TIPIA Act, which is the Texas Information Act and Policy Act, and you have to request it under TIPIA. And then if they don't respond, then you have to go to the Attorney General's office to see what the Attorney General can get them to
make it real easy for you, right?
And then the Attorney General, if you don't get all your information, then you get to go to the District Attorney's office. So transparency is an issue. And then you have an issue with what are they doing with the money. And so you have an unelected board that most of the time they don't even take competitive bids. They are supposed to be doing competitive bids on whatever they're spending the money on for anything under $50,000. But then if they don't, then your only alternative is to file a lawsuit in state district court and try to pursue that, or I guess take the case to the district attorney and see if there's grounds to pursue a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Their real power comes, I think, though, from being able to issue bonds, right?
Yes, well, they get to, when they get really grandiose ideas and get very excited about employing a lot of architects and urban planners and engineers, then they want to do a big project with the bond. And most of these districts are formed in the legislature with the provision that you can never dissolve them as long as the bond is outstanding. The bond would have to be paid. So in point of place, there was one for St. George's Place, which is just there between Chimney Rock and Sage and is off of Richmond Avenue. And it's about 650 homes. So there was a small group that were very determined that they wanted this tax, even though they were residential. And they got an existing district to change their boundaries. And that's another issue in the legislature when they're formed. They're not particularly distinct boundaries, and they can go to the mayor and say, we want to extend, we've decided this property is worth a lot of money, so we want to extend our boundaries and take those in. And our Montrose district, when it was originally formed in 2009, it was supposed to stop at the Southwest Freeway. That would be the southern border. But then you had Marvy Finger come in and build his beautiful building, the Museum Tower, further down Montrose, and they were like, oh, I think we want that too, because that brings in a lot of tax money. And so it's really kind of shifty how it's done. There's no template for these districts. I know of people in Laredo that have a district and they have no dissolution clause. The only way they could ever dissolve that district is to have a recall vote of the city councilman, have the city councilman vote to dissolve the district. And so it's not an egalitarian type of thing. And then when you follow the money and see where the money is going, you have a management group that charges X number of dollars every month to produce the board meeting and kind of oversee all the little committees. And currently our management group is Halls Hill Calderon. And they're professional. They manage, I believe, 10 of the districts in Houston. And for our district, they charge us $30,000 a month. It started out at about $18,000 in 2011, but now we're up to $30,000. It takes more money to run the district.
Who appoints the members to these districts, and in terms of how they're...
When they are formed in the legislature, they go in with a set board, a suggested board of directors, and that comes from the mayor's office. Okay, the mayor has sole discretion over who serves on the board. And many times people say, well, I'm going to put my resume in. And by state law, you are supposed to own property in the district and be a taxpayer as well. Like in our district, you would have to own commercial property, or you can be the designated agent for someone that owns property in the district. And recently I just did a TPIA because I kept looking around this board table, and you had all these attorneys, you had people that had worked on political campaigns, people that had worked on the previous mayor's campaigns, chiefs of staffs for state representatives, ex-chief of staffs for city council people. And you're thinking, what do they know about our area, and what do they know about our business? So I requested the resumes on the board members, and they told me they didn't have any. They couldn't come up with them. So then I went to the Attorney General's office, and they were pretty rapid. It was a nice thing to see. And they came back and said, you're going to have to give her the information. But basically, they could only find about 4 board members out of 13 that had owned property in the district. So you're back to there's no oversight. So what do you do because you have illegal board members serving? According to state law, you're back to filing a lawsuit and going into state district court, or getting the district attorney to file a lawsuit to try to deal with this issue. Wow. And our district attorney's pretty busy. Houston's a busy place.
Yeah, right.
So it makes it challenging.
Well, Joe, in your experience in Austin, was there anything that you could get any positive vibes about coming away from that meeting with, that what you and Daphne were talking about had any effect on the people that were supposedly listening to you?
The committee was definitely listening. They were very sympathetic and basically it came up with 2 things: the transparency, which Daphne just mentioned, or the lack of transparency. And I'll give you a couple of good examples of that here in just a second. The other was basically how these special districts and TERS, and I'll talk about that in just a second, how they start out very small, and then they morph into this huge machine, political machine, that evolves today, like the Uptown Management District and the Midtown and the Montrose Management District, which are just basically, we call it the money go round. This is for the money, the huge amounts of money that come in and the huge amounts of contracts that go out, and very little is ever seen in a positive manner. Now, give you an example, and that's what the committee heard. Now, where it goes from that, we don't know, because right after we all testified, and there was some really good testimony there by people from these management districts, then the lawyers who were for all these management districts, they were all in one corner over in the room, and we're talking about major law firms, and then they felt like they needed to get up and say something to defend themselves, and they got very little sympathy from the committee, although they're in front of the committees all of the time, because that's who's generating all this is that. And one of the things that was touched on briefly, and the lawyers didn't want to talk about this, were in addition to the special districts like Daphne was just talking about, they also have their brothers in crime called the TERS. The tax increment reinvestment zones. There's three. This was something once again created by the legislature to go into an area, define the area in blighted areas to where to encourage developers to come in and create development and get reimbursed through bond sales and really grow a blighted area.
I found out I was living in a blighted area. I didn't even know it.
Well, and ironically in
Memorial City, obviously.
Ironically, in 1999, two or three people were successful to get classified as a TERS, Memorial City area, which is Memorial, the Uptown area, which is Tanglewood and Uptown, and the Upper Kirby area, which is parts of River Oaks and all in that particular area. So they form these TERS. Now, another term for TERS is robbing the poor to give to the rich. Mm-hmm. We used to hear the Robin Hood, old Robin Hood, they robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. It's absolutely the turnaround from that. And here's an example, because the TERS, they come in and they freeze the tax base. Let's say 1999. Let's say what the Galleria was in 1999. Okay, give it a figure of $5 billion. Okay. After 1999, the increase in property values all went into the TERS. It did no longer go to all the people in Houston. It stayed in that little area. So from a $5 billion valuation, where the Uptown and Galleria now may be $20 billion valuation, the people who need the money the worst are not getting it. It's staying right there. Now, and what did they do with it? And here's where Metro comes back. Your favorite subject of Metro comes back. Metro wanted to build a rail down Richmond and Post Oak Boulevard. They had big plans to do it. All right. Well, they went broke. Metro went broke building the other rails that no one uses, the light rails. And so Uptown decided they were going to do a bus rapid transit down Post Oak Boulevard. Didn't tell anybody. There were no public meetings. They claimed there was, but there were no public meetings whatsoever. And they got city council to approve this idea, and basically $200 million expenditure, to where they're going to tear up Post Oak Boulevard, take all the trees down, put a dedicated bus lane down the middle of Post Oak Boulevard. Now, they'll replant the trees, but here's the kick. Here's where Metro comes in. The idea was to alleviate traffic on Post Oak Boulevard. Of course, Post Oak Boulevard doesn't have the big traffic problem that San Felipe and Westheimer and Richmond have, and that traffic is all because of 610 bottleneck. Metro has tried over the last 15 years 7 different times to bus people into the Galleria area. All of those have failed. There's less now than 1,000 people riding buses into the Galleria. So the idea is for this bus project to have a Northwest Transit Center at 610 and I-10 and a Bel Air Transit Center over at West Park and Rice Boulevard in that area. And then all of these people will feed into this area, which they're doing now. And there's less than 1,000 people that are riding. Right. They're saying, Metro came out first and Uptown came out and said, when they put this in, 14,000 more riders will come to take the bus, which will be, if you're living in Katy, whether you're a lady or a gentleman, you'll get in your car, you'll drive to a park and ride. You'll get out of your car, you'll get on a bus. That bus will then take you to another park and ride where you'll have to pick up some other people. And then that bus will take you to the Northwest Transit Center. And that's $4.75. Thank you. Then you get off of the bus at the Northwest Transit Center, and for $1.25, it takes you to Uptown, and it drops you off in the middle of the street, and you walk 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 5 blocks, 6 blocks to your office. If you want to go home, you reverse that. So it's $11.50, I believe, a day to take something that people are not doing now.
Right, and it's only going to take you 2 to 3 times as long as if you had taken your car.
Taken your own car. So there's where I'm saying the TERS and the Metro and the management district, more the TERS than the management district, but certainly Metro, because this money could be going to other parts of town that need it far more than the Uptown Galleria did. And the same thing happens at Memorial City on that deal. Yeah. And who suffers? The people that need the money the most, the transit-dependent people, are being denied good transportation.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could make the case that I need the money the most, but what really irritates me about those TERS is that they came across with a very interesting marketing plan that, these people are now going to take care of their own property. We're going to give this tax freeze, tax abatement. The problem is the city of Houston never said, and we're going to freeze our spending at the same level before we gave them these tax abatements. So that's why my taxes in the residential area near Memorial City keep going up 10% every year because they're trying to backfill all the lost revenue that they gave to the TERS. And I'm not getting any particular benefit from the TERS, although I don't have any objection to the way Memorial City is being run. I think it's a first-class operation, but nonetheless, the fact that it's been done on the backs of taxpayers is something that really is not fair and irritates me that I have to now see my taxes continue. I don't get 10% better services or more services every year from the city of Houston. I get 10% more taxes because the TERS have been exempted from paying any additional taxes that they're supposed to.
And to further state that, it's the overhead that these guys generate. The fellow that runs the Uptown TERS and management district's compensation is almost $400,000 a year, and that's a city. That's an employee, $400,000 a year. And then I looked at the management district's budget, and 40% of the Uptown management district's budget is G&A, which is salaries and rent. So 40%. So all these guys are doing are just creating bigger jobs, more jobs, feeding the deal.
More bureaucracy.
I think when Bill King was running for mayor, he went to the Uptown people, and the Uptown TERS and management district have so much money. And he said, "Why are you doing this bus project? It doesn't make any sense." And their answer was, "We have to feed the beast." What an answer.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Well, yeah, all that is so intertwined with all this crony capitalism that's going on right now that once you get people in positions of authority, in one area, they're more than willing to try to do something to help out their compatriots in some other bureaucracy that can benefit by some other contract or project. One of the things that what's going on with that Memorial Park project in Uptown that I hear about? They're trying to tear up and redo all of Memorial Park for some
Well, I'm going to probably
terrible amount of money. I don't remember.
I'm going to probably defer to Daphne on that because
okay.
she has very close friends that actually one close friend that served with I'm a Hog, I believe.
Yes, the last of the original Memorial Park Conservancy, Frank Smith.
Oh,
and
yeah,
was good
Frank
friends
Smith.
and was a
Sure,
lifetime
I
member.
know Frank.
And I think they decided when Frank was like, I'm not in agreement with spending $200 million or $300 million to redo the park, because they always love to tell you, don't worry, we're cutting down all the trees, but we're going to plant other trees. And Memorial Park is really meant to be a nice natural enclave, and they really want to do a park, which, back to Jim's contention, the people in our city that really need parks and need nicer parks. When you look at a map on the east side or southeast side of Houston, it is just a park desert. And so then you have over here Memorial Park, which everyone is happy with. It's an athlete's park. You go there to play sports, or you go there to walk or to run or jog. And so it's wonderful for that. But now we're going to put a rotunda, and we're going to put a parking lot over here. And we want to move the ballparks to the north part. And when I asked them about the ballparks, I said, but the noise and all of that bad air coming off of Interstate I-10, they said, don't worry, we're going to do a 20-foot berm. And the noise and the bad air won't come over the 20 feet. So, and I think, and they're looking at the existing trees, and the whole thing is very illogical. It's a very good work project. And as I suggested at City Council when I spoke about it, that they should take this work project, and it's a wonderful park design, and do it where it's needed on the east side, the poor side of Houston, that really has been neglected. And it's just like Metro's new bus network. And they used to call it Reimagine. But after we would be up at the microphone saying, well, Reimagine, you just lost your bus ride. And that's what happened to everyone on the east side and the southeast of Houston, because they didn't buy new buses to do that plan. They took the buses from the poor side and put them over here, because the poor people some of those people are working 2 and 3 jobs. Even us with businesses, we still manage to carve out a little time to go to a meeting. But if you're a working mom and you have children at home, you don't have time to go to some hearing or a meeting about your bus ride at 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, that's the joke of all these meetings that these civic organizations like Metro have. The people that have a job and a family to raise, they don't have any time to go to these meetings to discuss the esoterics of what these transportation
Correct.
and urban planners are having in store for us. It's just this ridiculous elitist attitude that, oh, well, we know better than you what kind of service you need. It's really ironic, I think, like we were talking about earlier, when the Metro light rail initiatives started raining down on us in Houston 10 years ago or whatever. Some of the Metro surveys that were done on their current bus riders, you can go into their files and look at them. What were the bus riders complaining about their Metro service, bus service 10 years ago? They were saying, well, first of all, we'd like the bus to come closer to our house. And secondly, we'd hate to transfer. Once we get on a bus, we'd like to go where we're going. And third, standing is terrible. We'd always want a seat. So what do we do with light rail? Every single one of those things is doubly worse than it was before. It doesn't stop but 1/3 of the stops that the bus stop went to.
Yes.
Everybody has to transfer now if you're going from north to the south. And third, it's only designed to have 30% of the riders have seats.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It's a sham. The bus riders are just the pawns that are being pushed around by the urban planners as to justify somehow some increased mobility that they're going to get as a result of all these projects, which are really benefiting the construction and architectural and other advertising firms that are really making the money from the Metro contracts.
They
the
love
real,
those
the real,
studies.
the real
They love
customers of Metro aren't the people that are riding Metro.
No.
They're the construction, engineering, and advertising firms that are behind pushing this monstrosity
Well,
off on the rest of us.
That's how they spent $74 million. They just wrote it off a couple of years ago. $74 million in studies on Richmond, $43 million in studies on Post Oak. And, you know, it was kind of a joke on our street because you'd go out the front door in the morning and there'd be yet another survey company. And Richmond Avenue in front of my shop house is only 56.5 feet wide. So it's like, they must have surveyed it at least a dozen times. And I thought, well, it's just money. I mean, why else? The street hasn't changed. It's not moved. So it's very sad because Metro gets a penny of our sales tax dollar. They get on
$300 million
average.
a year.
Oh no, it's gone up to about 600 to 700 million.
Oh, really?
Because
I'm
of the
behind
oil
the
business
times.
boom, they got more. Now it's dropping now, but it has been. I think last year it was 600 million, and it'll probably be close to 700 million. But then you look at the Harrisburg line that's right here, and it's only 3.3 miles, and they've spent almost 700 million of that cash on this line. And of course, it would never qualify for federal funds, which is why they never even attempted to apply for that, because one, they didn't have ridership, and two, you had a brownfield site, you had contamination, and you didn't have any density to even, but Houston has a problem with density for light rail anyway, wherever it goes. So it's really because of them coming into our neighborhood, it's made us be more aware of where is the money going. And that's how, and then you find that the special districts and the TERS were really meant to help disadvantaged areas with absentee landlords. They do not do maintenance, so they might install landscaping and irrigation, but if it breaks down, that is someone else's job to go and repair it. And a perfect example of that is Bel Air Boulevard out by Sharpstown. And you see all these naked little hose and everything from where they spent millions of dollars putting in the landscaping and some sidewalks, but then there was no maintenance on it. And so it's all just
Of course, that's the problem
away.
with light rail in general, naturally. They get all these big grants to build it, and yet after they build it, there's no money to keep it maintained.
Well, and just to throw it in, I believe, I wish our friend Paul Magaziner was here, but I believe they predicted 10,000 riders for the Harrisburg.
Oh, it was like 12 to 14,000. It's pretty close to what they're predicting.
And after a year now, it's less than 1,000.
Oh, it's even less than that. I've ridden
Well, it
to
can't be less than
Harrisburg.
1,000.
Yeah, it can't be. Huh? That's got to be the baseline.
As a baseline.
They have to start somewhere.
But see, those were studies that Daphne was speaking about, were these, and Lord knows what studies that were done on how much they spent on the Green Line or Harrisburg line. But there was an actual study that was used to get the money, put the money to sell the money together, showing 12,000 riders, people would ride this bus. I mean, this train, light rail. It just doesn't happen. And they want to try to repeat it. And I believe that if people need to be watching for this. If anybody hears this one thing, the mayor and the Metro is going to try to put a referendum next November together to get more money for Metro to do more projects like Harrisburg and more money down the drain. And it's going to be an off-year election. They're going to try to lift the revenue cap. The city is going to try to lift the revenue cap. That would be a disaster for the city of Houston.
Is that going to raise taxes if they lift the revenue cap?
It has to raise taxes.
And so
Well, I
do
don't
we know
know.
how high it's going to go?
As long as their property taxes are going up 10% a year, they're they're busting the cap now, so they don't even have to raise the
Well,
taxes in order to bust the cap.
No, because
Exactly.
the evaluation
Yeah,
is
because the
up, so-
valuation.
But those are two items that are going to be coming up in November, and they're going to spend massive amounts of money, both the city and Metro, massive amounts of money to try to sell the citizens on why they need more projects like this Harrisburg deal over there. Now, unfortunately, and Daphne and I were speaking about this earlier, as far as Metro is concerned, only 2% of the people use transit in Houston, 2%. So that means 98% people don't, which means 98% of people don't pay attention, probably,
Right.
and they're getting fleeced. Now, I
are.
mean, I know 1% doesn't sound like much. You know, you spend $5,000 a year in the city of Houston, and that's only $500. But would you just absolutely hand $500 over to somebody for nothing?
Yeah.
But that's what you're doing right now.
I know, it's ridiculous. And all that money basically finds its way back into the political process through campaign contributions and other things. That's
Metro
where the
pays a
money go
lot.
round.
It's the money go round.
Starts from, because there is some incentive for people to push these projects, and the incentive is that it winds up lining their pocketbooks one way or
They
another.
get to be a
whether it-
consultant. They get to be a neighborhood
go to-
consultant.
No, the
If you
neighborhood
go
consultant.
to any of these Metro meetings, and I've urged people to go, it's an education. You don't have to speak, just go. But you go to a special district meeting, particularly, or a TERS meeting, and there'll be a bunch of people there. And those people are all contractors.
Yeah. The first thing you do if you get to ask a question, you ask, would all the people that either have a contract with the TERS or work for the TERS please stand up now?
stand up
and you
now.
know,
It'll be over
three-quarters of the
90%.
people
Well over
stand
90%.
up, because they're all there to for their own self-interest and benefit.
Well, the problem, and Jim talked about this, is that these people, the TERS money is based on taxpayer money. And of course, the management district money is also based on taxpayer money. And they all dream, if they haven't taken out a bond, they want to take out a bond. The St. George group I spoke of earlier, they were only in existence a few months, and they were already wanting to take out a bond.
Oh, yes.
And so at the end of the day, if that district can't repay the bond, who repays the bond?
Yeah.
So, you know, there are a lot of issues, and the legislature really didn't quite understand how deep the money issue was going to go on that, and they would be abused.
And we were talking about Memorial Park. Everybody loves Memorial Park. I mean, who couldn't love Memorial Park?
Right.
And so politically, to say something against Memorial Park is suicide. All right? So what they did was, and I say this is Mayor Parker, they let the TERS, the Uptown TERS, annex Memorial Park. So it is actually inside of the Uptown TERS now.
Of course, they didn't get any tax revenue from
No,
annexing.
but what
No,
they
but they
did
have
do,
control.
what they did do is now they're going to increase the TERS bonding capacity.
Oh, yeah.
So the TERS will now, with all of that huge incremental increase in taxes, that's not going to Sunnyside, not going to South Houston or East Houston or parts of North Houston, is now going to go in a bond that's going to be spent on Memorial Park. So the people that should be getting the tax money in Sunnyside or wherever it is now are going to be losing their tax money or revenue, and it's going to go to Memorial Park, a park they probably don't ever even use.
That's right.
So once again, it's robbing from the poor and giving to the rich, and the money keeps going around, and only a certain amount of people. I saw something today from Wayne Dolcevine, I think, is putting it out on his deal tomorrow about the Uptown people they do X number of dollars of business with disadvantaged businesses, and they showed the number one disadvantaged business is a company called Gupta Engineering that's doing the that's doing the design work for Uptown, and of the $4.5 million that goes to disadvantaged businesses, 4.3 of it went to Gupta, and then they showed a picture of his multi-million-dollar house that he lives in. This is a disadvantaged person, very privileged,
You know,
to be on the money-go-round.
You got to realize, you got to appreciate the reception that somebody like Bernie Sanders gets when he
Sure.
says the system is rigged.
Yeah.
It is rigged.
It is rigged.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And he's touched a lot of people. I don't happen to think that many of the suggested cures that he has are going to do anything to improve it. But we've got to stop. We've got to get to the place where we can unrig the system. And unfortunately, it's not, I don't think, I may be naive on this, but I don't think it's the big corporations that are rigging the system. It's the cronyism between the government and
The bureaucrats.
business and the bureaucrats and the corporations that are rigging the system. What we need is just a free-for-all competition between people to see who can serve consumers best and not try to rig all this behind-the-scenes regulation and rules that only a certain subset of favored people can actually qualify.
That's a big problem at City Hall. I mean, even one of the councilmen, Greg Travis, tried to get that new body camera contract that the police are getting. And I was flabbergasted. He actually testified when he was trying to get them to postpone the approval of the contract to one of Mayor Parker's, the previous mayor's, favorite companies, evidently. And he said, I went online and you could get these same body camera for $36,000 less each. And so the city, we the taxpayers, were paying an additional $36,000 per body camera. And, you know, they were buying, I don't know, 1,000, something like that.
I mean,
It's amazing.
I like the idea of body cameras, and I think there is a
I
lot of
think
room
there's a
for
good,
improvement
good,
in
yeah, good.
Police enforcement, and it's a shame that, you know, any improvement we try to make, there's always somebody in there with their hand in their fist and in somebody else's pocket and in somebody else's campaign contributions in order to manipulate the cost of what it should be a lot less.
That's true.
more
They don't realize it's all our money
Yeah,
because
right.
we're all taxpayers.
And it's interesting that you brought up Bernie Sanders, because let's bring up the other controversial name here just for a second, Donald Trump. He's basically, they were both saying the same thing, and in a different manner.
Yeah.
We used to talk about it in a poker game. You know, you got all the money out on the table, and you knew you have a losing hand. All of a sudden, you know, what do? You turn the table over, so all the chips fly and all the money goes, and you do it. And that's kind of where Trump is and Sanders is. They've turned the table over. And if I've learned anything from those two guys, it's that people can make a difference. I mean, you got to get up there and you've got to go. You've got to holler and scream. You almost, even at the local level, because I found, once I saw what Trump was, and he's kind of a demagogue, they say, and you know, that's okay. Sometimes you can be a good demagogue. But that's exactly what I was doing when I was going up for Uptown in the city, hollering about this stupid $200 million deal that nobody had wanted and nobody cared. You know, you have to get up there and you have to be a little rough sometime, because if you don't get rough with these, and I don't mean threaten them with physical violence or anything like that, but these people sit in high positions. They get invited to dinners, free dinners. They get free tickets to Astro games, to Texan games. They get free everything. And when you get up there and you shake that up a little bit, then you can cause them to change. And that's I do believe that. I have seen that. Uptown, we're kind of going all over the place now, but Uptown used to be very secretive about their financials. Well, now they post them online because they're trying to be transparent. They've got everything they wanted anyhow, so they can't do it. But
yeah, it's a shame we don't have a little better quality of investigative journalism in Houston. I mean, the Chronicle just kind of rolls over, and for anything that the mayor and the city council comes up with, it's really pretty sad that we don't have any a voice. That I guess what Wayne Dolcifino has his own consulting firm.
Yes,
now
he
or
was
something?
forced out. He was probably forced out because of you know, he was controversial. And I got to tell you, I used not to like him. I thought when he was on TV, I thought he was kind of a jerk. But then I got to know the guy. I got to know him.
He's our kind of jerk.
He's our kind of guy. He is a very honest
right.
guy, and he's not afraid of anybody. That's what we need, is those kind of investigative reporters. Because I don't know, I'm not going to name any names, but here's Metro again. I was involved with another group in suing Metro for violation of the 2003 referendum.
Right.
That was to stop this bus
Exactly.
deal. All right, and we were going through some stuff that, looking at this, and a friend of mine looked and saw this name, a consultant, on the Metro registry that month for $10,000, and looks back, and so we sent a taxpayer request, and lo and behold, that guy's name is on there, and we looked at what it is, and Metro paid him to go speak to the judge in our case. Now that's,
Now the timing was a little suspicious.
when
It
I
was
talk
only
about
like maybe
we're
3
not
days
supposed to be,
before the judgment.
you're not supposed to be talking to judges. Now we don't know what they talked to
don't
the
know what
judge
they
about,
talked about, yeah.
but the Houston Chronicle was all over that story, and they were going to break that story big time and go dive into what else is going on over there. Mm-hmm. Well, they shut that story down, and that reporter is now in Oregon.
Wow.
That's true.
She was probably the closest thing to a real reporter this town's had. Her name, Dreesen was her name.
One of the other things on the Chronicle lately, I have to give some kudos to our mayor in terms of him coming back at the Houston Chronicle after their scathing editorial on him and rejecting that the San Felipe Galleria high-rise for
Housing project.
a housing
on Fountain.
project for low-income people. And although he kind of put a lot of it behind the cost issue about why should we be paying $240,000 for a condominium for some disadvantaged people or unemployed people to stay in. I thought the real crux of his argument was, and of course the Chronicle was saying, oh, well, we're denying these minorities a chance to move into a nice, quote, white neighborhood where they can benefit from all of the cultural and other upscale things that are going on there. And Sylvester quite accurately pointed out, what's the problem that we can't have the same kind of schools in these minority neighborhoods that we have in these higher quality? We pay the HISD students the same. We're paying the same for the school buildings and everything else. Why should we think we have to send minority children to white districts in order for them to get a good education or to succeed in life? And I think it's very and like I think he's very insulted by the fact is, and another writer that I'm familiar with, Thomas Sowell, who is a black economist, was always commenting. He says, I was always insulted when people thought that I should have to be sent to a white school in order to learn something, and there's got to be something to be said for that. If we can't have quality schools in minority neighborhoods, then where's the problem? I mean, either it's a problem with HISD itself, or we're facing some cultural issues that are very hard to overcome from just a strictly educational standpoint. But that interjecting people of one cultural and economic class into the middle of another cultural and economic class is not going to do anything but cause friction and ultimately be a failure. Unfortunately, there's no easy.
You're saying that the blacks, which is totally adverse to what the egalitarian issue is, that the blacks, obviously, if you're injecting them into a white neighborhood that's more affluent, that means that their culture is lesser than the white culture, and that to me, neighborhoods and the history of the neighborhood, and that is how you keep a city alive.
Right.
And I am really not into the gentrification issue, and certainly where we are up here off of Harrisburg, it has been a major nightmare and totally changed. And when you have townhouses coming in and the price of the dirt changes, the land changes, and then the people that have been raised here for 60 years can't afford to live here anymore. And that all goes with insane. I really believe for as much money as we pay for our school taxes, there's not any reason for every area of Houston to have a school that represents that neighborhood and gets a quality education, but also reflects the history of the neighborhood. Because I think that HISD was very unfair in taking down some of the black schools. And then it makes you wonder when they want to move them into the white neighborhood. And the schools, there's only so many students a teacher can handle in a class anyway. And in particular, Briar Grove Elementary was already beyond capacity. So the mayor gets brownie points. He did a good call on that and made the Houston Chronicle sounded very whiny,
Yeah,
so
very
whiny
weak
about it.
and very 60s oriented.
Yes,
in terms of,
yes, it was a time warp. I was
yeah.
surprised to read the
You know,
editorial.
David, I'm glad you brought that up because, and here I sound like a brokered record. Here we go back to the TERS again. But you're talking about HISD. We give them plenty of money to and we all know education is the true problem in this country, or the lack of it, because the only way poverty is going to be solved or lessened is through education of the folks that need to be educated the most. And I go back to the TERS again. This is money that could have been going into the parks around the disadvantaged schools. This is money that could be improving the streets, improving those type of areas. This money, and it's now bonds up around $350 million in the last few years, have been sold by these TERS to go into that area, and they could have been going into that area, and we wouldn't be facing that.
Who gave them the right to do the bonds?
Well, that's going to be a question, I think, in the Texas legislature and by a lawsuit, is these TERS can sell bonds, and there's no voter approval necessary. No, it's against Texas law, really is.
Yeah, and of course, one of the other things that's driving this kind of disruption in the real estate market is this whole philosophy of transit-oriented development.
TODS, yes, that acronym. Yes, I've heard that a lot, TODS.
Which is, Metro's not about having transportation for the people that live there. It's about creating real estate value by putting stations and lines into places where people who know where the lines are going to go can go in and buy up the property, and as the property value
You're
presumably
entirely
rises,
correct.
although in a lot of cases, and I think they've probably seen that on South Main, the property values didn't rise like
No,
everyone
actually,
thought.
the property values and there have been studies nationally, they actually drop, because who wants to have a station in front of their house where you have a lot of vagrants hanging out? And Channel 13, talking about investigative reporting, Ted Oberg went out and actually did a story on how filthy all of the stations are, the seats in the cars, which makes you wonder, we have a $28 million facility up here. What are they doing?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of issues with that. But I don't want us to end without reminding people that Uptown TERS, we have two beautiful drives in Houston, in our city. One is Post Oak Boulevard. It used to be our most beautiful retail street. Nothing to compare, even in the state of Texas, one of the prettiest in the country. And we have Memorial Drive going through the park, which is always a wonderful view. And that TERS wants to take away both of those. They want to build a tunnel in Memorial Park,
I heard that.
and have us go in the tunnel, which with the flooding, I guess if we had scuba gear in the car, it'd be okay. But no, the TERS have forgotten what their mission was, and they were supposed to be about infrastructure. You have to fix the pipes underneath the streets first, and then you fix the street. And that is not what we have going on in our city today.
Unfortunately, it's
Unfortunately not.
It's a quick fixed to raise the occupancy rate and build more square feet and cram it in before anybody realizes what the long-term consequences
Concrete
of
mafia.
that
That concrete mafia is working every day. Every day.
Okay, well, we're going to need to kind of wind down our conversation here. We're coming to the end of our hour. Are there any closing remarks? Jim, do you want to say anything about result of your experiences, or any advice you have for people that want to get more involved like you've done and
Right.
create a model for some community activism?
Yes. Please, 3 years ago, I was a guy that just was living my life trusting government. Don't trust government. Verify your government. Know who your city council person is. Know who your state rep is. Know who your your federal congressman is. All politics is local, but if you let it go unchecked, it will become as big as the federal government.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
I second that. I know you really do need to know, because that's what we're paying the tax dollars for, and that is their job to represent us. And they should be the city councilman, state rep, federal rep. All of that matters. And my advice too is to pay attention and get up and show up. Because when you go to these meetings and you go to these hearings, you will learn more than you ever thought was out there. Yes, they are never dull.
Even though they're all attended by all the people that are going to benefit
that's
by the
another
result.
show, David. That's the fake stakeholders group. Yeah, you always have those plants in there. You know, whether it's a cattle auction or a horse auction, you always have somebody bidding against you who's not really a bidder. So there's
Okay.
nothing different in these government hearings.
Well, like we go back to what Thomas Jefferson said, that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and as long as we're willing to sit back and think we've delegated something to some well-meaning people. I was watching, I think it was Book TV the other day, and somebody had a quote from a 20th century philosopher by it was Reinhold Niebuhr. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of his name before, but anyway, he said, you know, that the problem with politicians is that statesmanship tends to degenerate into opportunism, and opportunism tends to degenerate into dishonesty, and therefore what we have is the kind of situation that we have today, where where a large majority of people that are presumably in public service, the people that went to work in government to do good but wound up doing well, those are the people
Yes.
that we've got to keep our eyes on, and that we can't just think that we've delegated our freedoms and our wallets to someone else to take care of them the same way we would ourselves. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of effort from some people, and especially like people like yourselves, who are willing to put it on the line, regardless of what your personal returns might be on that. But I certainly appreciate all your activism, and I hope our listeners appreciate the fact that we have some people in Houston that are willing to go to the mats like you two are, and take the time to try to inform the rest of us about what's really going on in both city and state government, and what we can do to make Houston a better place to live. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening tonight to Public Affairs, Public Access.